Hello everyone, my name is Nick Infernus and welcome back to another comic book review. I accidentally teased this one in the Aquaman video, so let's get into Season 2 of the very contentious What If. Contentious because, well, there's some debate of whether or not this show even has a point at all. I don't care, it's fun seeing these little what if scenarios. Now, What If Season 1 was one of my very first reviews, in this series at least, and what I did for that one was I ranked all 9 of the episodes. That resulted in a video that was longer than it really needed to be, and plus, due to most of the episodes being pretty consistent quality here, I didn't really see the need to do that this time. So one thing that I was kind of worried about going into this season is that, judging by the list of episode titles, very little of it seemed actually interesting. Like, you have What If Nebula joined the Nova Corps? Okay, not sure what you can do with that. What if Hela fought the Ten Rings? That could be interesting, but again, what are you doing? What if the Avengers assembled in 1602? What the hell are you even doing with that one? You see what I mean, right? It's different. Like, the titles alone don't do what they do in the actual episodes justice, because when you get into the actual episodes, the execution is actually pretty decent. It's flawed, and I'll get to why it's flawed later, but I think that the stories they were trying to tell with each of these episodes were for the most part actually pretty good. You with Nebula, you get this Blade Runner style murder mystery. With the Avengers in 1602, it's tied into the sequel to the Peggy Carter fighting the Hydra Stomper episode, and you see all these different medieval Shakespearean versions of the Avengers. With I'm already forgetting what the second one I mentioned was. That's wonderful. But like Hogan Saving Christmas, you have a Die Hard parody. Kahori reshaping the world. I have no idea why they felt the need to introduce an original character in a What If series. I wouldn't have minded seeing a special presentation about this. Wouldn't have minded that. Instead, it kind of just feels like we're wasting a slot, but it's. I guess it could be worse. At least there are no episodes in here that I felt were as bad as the Thor or Killmonger episodes from season 1. So yeah, in concept, a lot of the episodes were, they sounded pretty underwhelming. In execution, the stories they were trying to tell were, in practice, a lot better. And one episode that I felt was absolutely excellent from the season, not as good as, what if Doctor Strange lost his heart instead of his hands, because that will always be the best episode of any Marvel Disney Plus show. But easily the season's best episode was the 80s Avengers going up against a young Peter Quill and Ego. That's easily the best episode in this season, since not only is there actual chemistry and camaraderie between the 80s Avengers, but it's also a very interesting lineup. You have Hank Pym's Ant-Man, you have Bill Foster's Goliath, of course Peggy Carter, Howard Stark, Winter Soldier is there, King T'Chaka, Black Panther, and even Thor shows up. It's a lineup that sounds pretty interesting in concept and is even better in execution, but there's an actual need for emotional investment. Well, there's emotional investment is warranted in this case, both with you know both with Hope Van Dyne and Peter Quill, how they're able to connect over their love of, at the times, modern music, and how both of them lost their moms at a young age. And even Howard convincing Bucky, the Winter Soldier, basically talking him out of assassinating Peter by reminding him of Steve. And that was really the moment that cemented that as the best episode of the season for me. But in general, that was just a fun as hell episode. So far the season looks pretty good. It's pretty interesting stories that they're able to tell with these not so interesting sounding concepts, and easily one of the best episodes in What If with the 80s Avengers. Unfortunately, while the stories they tried to, and yes, I know I said the execution of the stories was pretty good. That's not what I meant. I meant in practice, the stories they tried to tell were pretty good. In execution, most of these episodes needed to be longer than 30 minutes. Like, there's just not enough time to have fully fleshed out stories. If these were at least 40 minutes, I could have gotten behind that. But since they're all 30, it feels like almost every single one of them is rushed in some way. The 80s Avengers episode is the only one that doesn't feel like that, which is probably another reason why it's the best episode of this season. But with each episode, they all have the same feeling of like, yeah, that was pretty interesting what you were trying to do with it, but you didn't give us enough time to be properly invested. See, at least with the 80s Avengers episode, at least there, it feels like they actually thought of, like, okay, how can we do what we want to do in 30 minutes without it feeling, rushed or underdeveloped. With the rest of them, it feels like they had ideas. It's like they had ideas for like much longer episodes and then thought, okay, what do we need to cut out to make these 30 minutes long? That's what each of the rest of them feel like, and they all feel underdeveloped, and it's hard for me to really care about any of them when it feels like we didn't get to spend enough time in any of the stories. Like, I feel like I would have been much more behind Kahari if, and I apologize if I butchered that, if her episode was longer. And this leads to another problem where a lot of the victories feel hollow. Where, of course, Nebula taking down Nova Prime, that felt a bit hollow. The Gamora standing up to Thanos in the Grandmaster episode, hollow. I guess if you want to count, or like even the payoff in the 1602 Avengers episode, hollow. The victory against Strange Supreme, very hollow, especially because it's two extremely powerful characters going up an extremely powerful character. And they took the lazy route by just having them fire beams at each other and multiplying themselves with magic. So, overall, the season is very much a mixed bag. On the one hand, it has an excellent episode with Peter Quill attacking the 80s Avengers, and in general, the stories being a lot more interesting than the titles would imply. On the other hand, with the exception of that 80s Avengers episode, there is almost no investment in any of them because they don't give us enough time. The episodes just aren't long enough. And see, this is probably like most of the other MCU shows, it feels like they would need to be longer in terms of the amount of episodes. Here, just an extra 10 minutes with each episode would have been fine. Hell, maybe you could have done 10 minutes more with the 80s Avengers episode, but that was probably the only episode that didn't need it. That one could have used it. Maybe they could have done something interesting with that. The rest of them absolutely needed it. So, while it's not a complete failure, it's still not good enough to be in what I'd call the B tier. So it's a high C with a 2.5. Not bad, but it definitely could have been a lot better, and making it better would not have been that hard. Anyways, guys, that's going to be it for this video on What If Season 2. If you enjoyed, you know what to do. I'm not going to bore you with all the generic stuff. See you guys in the next video. Take care, and Godspeed.